All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Hope we're ready to hang out with our good friend Socrates again today, as we're going to be talking about the apology slideshow. All right. Awesome. All right. So last time we talked about the Euthyphro. And so we saw Socrates sort of in action, right? We we saw him conversing back and forth, asking questions, doing all of these things that are sort of that exemplify his method. Okay. So this week we're going to see, or maybe this week or this next couple of lectures, um, we're going to see Socrates uh, explaining his methods in a much more direct way. And so he's going to be explaining and defending these methods to the Athenian jury. Um, and so we're going to see, we're not just going to see his method in action, which we will see, but we will also see explanations and defenses of what it is that Socrates does. All right, so this is basically just a helpful sort of skeleton of the text. You know, just to kind of help you navigate through the text. We're going to be talking about focusing a little bit more on 1 through 3 today. So we're going to be going over the charges, and we're going to be going over some of Socrates' defense from these charges, right? So, without further ado, a little bit of background about the apology. So, the first thing is that the jury that he's testifying in front of is huge. Our text says it's 501 people. That's a lot of folks, right? And so, because there were so many people, uh, it was the prosecutor and the defendant that would suggest the punishments, and we'll see that a little later in the text. So the jurors, they were citizens of Athens. These are landowning folks. These are usually male. All of these native born. All of these things, and so they would vote, and the verdict was determined by a vote. And so they would vote on whether they wanted to go with the defendant's verdict or the prosecutor's verdict. In this case, they go with the prosecutor's verdict. They sentence Socrates to die. The other thing is that the word apology is not like not how we understand it, right? It's not like I'm sorry. Uh, it actually means a defense, and so we're going to see that Socrates is not apologetic in this text. In fact, he's kind of an asshole, and so it's helpful to keep in mind that this is not about Socrates talking about how sorry he is for what he's been doing. So, all right. Okay, so Socrates has been formally or officially charged with two things. First thing is corrupting the youth, and the second thing is not believing in the gods in whom the city believes, right? So he's getting accused of a kind of atheism, right? Not believing in the gods. There's a religious tone to it, and so it would actually you can see why Socrates was so concerned about getting at the nature of piety with Euthyphro, right? So he was just about to testify in front of Miletus and in front of the jury, and um, so he wants to know what piety is in order to defend against this latter charge. It's pretty interesting. Okay, so there are also informal um, accusations or yeah, informal accusations against Socrates as well. These are from the older people. So there are kind of two sets of accusers. There are the older ones, and there are the younger fellas. And so the formal, or the less formal or informal or unofficial accusation is the following. Socrates is a student of all the things in the sky and below the earth, and he makes the worse argument the stronger, right? So there are also two informal charges set against Socrates. Okay, and so he thinks that these two sets of accusations stand in relation, namely that the informal or unofficial charges against him are what's motivating the official charges. So that's the idea, is that there's an ulterior motive that his accusers have. Namely, they want to get him for these other things, so they're just charging him for something that will actually stick, is the idea. Okay, but okay, and so this is two statements from the text about the unofficial charges, or the real charges, as Socrates wants to say. But what are these actual charges, or what are these unofficial charges? What does it mean to be a student of things in the sky and below the earth? Why is that so bad? And why is it so bad to make the worse argument the stronger? Well, let's focus on the first charge, studying things in the sky and below the earth. This is what we might think of in modern day as just science, right? So it's leveled against Socrates that he is someone who is trying to explain natural phenomenon, things like rain or condensation or forest fires, with natural causes, right? As opposed to divine causes. Okay, so the allusion here is to what are known as the pre-Socratic philosophers. These are philosophers who existed before Socrates, hence pre-Socratic. These guys are focused on understanding natural things, understanding the world outside of ourselves, right? And so some of their questions include, is there an underlying substance that that makes everything else, right? So if I have an object made out of wood, I have an object made out of concrete, and I have an object made out of metal. Are these three different things made out of the same stuff? Or are they made out of different stuff? Are they made out of wood stuff, metal stuff, and concrete stuff? Or are they made all out of the same thing? And so these pre-Socratic philosophers, they're trying to argue that there's not three different stuffs that's making up these three things. Rather, there's an underlying substance that they all share, right? And so, for example, Thales wants to say that everything is made out of water. Heraclitus wants to say that everything is made out of fire. And so the four elements, I think it's Anaximander who wants to say that everything is made out of earth. I think, I'm not 100% sure. But at any rate, though, these philosophers are doing what we might call science, right? They're observing natural phenomenon and trying to explain it with natural causes or other natural phenomenon. And so we look at a thing made out of concrete, a thing made out of wood, and a thing made out of metal, and we say that, okay, all of those things are made out of atoms. Atoms are the underlying substance behind all of these very different looking things. Okay, so why is this also bad? Well, this is also bad for Socrates because he is demonstrating that we don't need the gods in order to explain these natural phenomena, right? We can explain these things with material causes or natural causes as opposed to divine ones, right? And so that's a major problem, right? So it's, you know, when there's a thunderstorm, it's not Zeus throwing down lightning bolts, right? Rather, there's some kind of natural cause to those things. And that didn't float so well for the people of Athens. So you can see here that Socrates is being accused of trying to do what we might think of as science. And that might relate in some way, and we'll talk about this later, that might relate in some way to his being an atheist or not believing in the gods. All right, and the second charge, so making the worse argument the stronger. They're accusing him of being a sophist or accusing him of sophistry. A sophist is a person, usually a politician or an orator, but somebody who makes a living training other people how to make friends and influence people. Okay, so these guys, I mean, they are philosophers, right? But rather, they are philosophers who aren't focused on truth, right? They don't want to know the truth. Truth is irrelevant. Arguments are not for getting at the truth or getting at knowledge or whatever. Rather, arguments need to be tailored to influencing people, making them do what we want them to do, right? These people are masters of rhetoric, right? And so they twist things around or say different things in order to get people to do what they want them to do, and they train other people how to do this. And so it's probably the case that some of the jurors have been educated by sophists. And so that makes this underlying or unofficial charge a little sketchy because, or there may be sophists that are actually in attendance. Who knows? But the idea here is that, look, Socrates is not concerned with the truth. He's not concerned with wisdom. He's concerned with winning people over and influencing them and training other people to do the same. Hence, you know, that might be loosely related to his corrupting the youth, right? Okay, so the big idea here is that the unofficial charges are for him being a scientist and him being a sophist. And we've seen why both of those things are problematic. So, yeah, so the other thing is that Socrates really isn't interested in either of these things, right? He's not a natural philosopher. When we see Socrates, he's talking about things like piety, right? This is in some sense an abstract thing. This is not, it's not like you can see piety out in the world, right? So he's focused on what we might call loosely are abstract things or concepts. And the second thing is that he is interested in the human soul. He's interested in flourishing, in moral uprightness, right? And so he's not focused on observing natural phenomena. He's focused on observing the human heart and like our motivations and being true to ourselves and things like this. In addition to concepts like virtue or knowledge or piety. And the other thing is, he doesn't seem to be a sophist either, because I mean, at least I think that he is genuinely after the truth. And we'll see that there are a lot of things that Socrates does in his defense that actually undermine his credibility, right? He's doing the very same things that he's being accused of. Well, why? Well, because he's actually interested in the truth. And so he doesn't seem to be a sophist either. At least he wants to say. Okay, so in defense of himself, right? He wants to say that he is the wisest of them all, right? And so Socrates gives us a story about his friend who goes to visit the oracle at Delphi, and his friend asks the oracle, "Hey, is there anybody wiser than Socrates?" And the oracle says, "Nah, no, there's no one else, not a single one." Okay, and so his friend tells Socrates, "Hey, Socrates, there's nobody wiser than you." And Socrates is like, doesn't believe it. He's like, "Well, yeah, I just know that I'm not wise at all, and blah, blah, blah. I'm so silly and so stupid. How could I be the wisest of them all? I just don't believe it." Um, and so, I guess he sounds, he's talking ironically there, I think, because in trying to sound humble, he's kind of boasting at the same time. It's a weird thing that's going on here. Um, and we also might question uh, his defense, right? So his friend is dead, right? His friend that actually spoke to the oracle. Uh, and so Socrates suggests that we have his friend's brother testify in his place. And so it's like, well, the oracle told my friend that the gods think that I'm the wisest of them all, right? But he didn't talk to an actual god, right? Oh, he talked to an oracle, right? But the oracle like told him that I'm the wisest, but then like he died or whatever, so we got to like get his brother, and his brother can back all this up, I promise. It just seems like a sketchy defense. It seems like it's the kind of thing that maybe we should be a little skeptical of. Anyway, that's my reading there. Okay, so in light of the oracle's claim, Socrates kind of makes it his mission to validate or verify what it is that they're talking about. So he doesn't believe the oracle. So what he does is he goes around and finds candidates for wisdom. So, okay, here are some guys who are probably wiser than I am: politicians, poets, and craftsmen. Okay, I bet they are wiser than me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go up to them and kind of do like I did with Euthyphro, just question them back and forth, do that, and see what they know. Do they really know stuff? Are they really wise, or are they full of bullshit? Okay, so he talks to the politicians, and he just makes this claim. He actually doesn't cite anything in particular, which I think is funny, because we might wonder, like, well, why exactly the politicians aren't wise? But he finds that people with high repute actually have the least to offer. And so the more powerful that you are, the less you know, which is really funny. Um, and so people who have less power know more stuff, people like poets or craftsmen. And so he doesn't even really cite anything in particular. He just says that the politicians really don't know anything at all. We might think to ourselves, well, who is he testifying in front of? Well, he's probably testifying in front of some politicians, right? And so he doesn't seem to be too smart here, right? This is something to keep in mind. Next, he goes to the poets, and he's talking to these poets, and he's listening to their poems, right? But then he asks them, well, what does this poem mean? And the poets can't give him a good answer, which is really funny. And so he says that they're saying all these nice things, but they really don't have any idea what it is that they're actually saying, which seems to undermine their being candidates for wisdom. A wise person would speak these poems, but then also know what they're talking about and know what they mean. In the last group are the craftspeople, and the craftspeople actually come the closest to being independently wise. So people like carpenters or metal workers or maybe animal husbandry people, these guys understand, or jewelers, these guys understand their craft and understand it really well. And so when Socrates goes to meet with these folks, Socrates learns all kinds of stuff from them, right? He learns about how to craft stuff with wood, with metal, how to make jewelry, all of these things. And so they start out as candidates for wisdom. However, because they know so much about their respective discipline, they think they know about everything else too, right? They don't understand that just because they're good at working with wood doesn't mean that they can talk about whether or not we have free will or what piety is or whatever, right? But they think that they do. And so in a way, they lose the humility that makes someone wise, right? So they think that they can talk about whatever just because they know a whole lot about making jewelry or whatever. And so Socrates concludes that these folks aren't really that wise either. Now, to go back to what I was saying previously, he is making these claims to a room full of politicians, poets, and craftspeople. So it really doesn't feel like he's helping himself out all that much by saying, hey guys, look at how much wiser I am than you. I don't know. Okay, so Socrates says that after he started doing this, people stopped liking me. And so what happens is Socrates gets all of these enemies because he shows up with all of his kids and questions these people and embarrasses them and confuses them and kind of pisses them off, right? And so what happens next is that Socrates gets all of these enemies among the elderly folk and the powerful folk in Athens. And so he's thinking that his search for wisdom is what's motivating these folks to accuse him of these crimes. All right, and okay, so that's his response to the unofficial charges, right? So him being a scientist or a pre-Socratic philosopher and him being a sophist. Okay, next he's going to move into what are known as the more recent charges or the official charges, the actual things that are making him show up at court. Okay, which are two things: corrupting the youth and not believing in the gods that the city believes in. Okay, so let's talk about the first accusation. And let's talk about Socrates' argument against the first charge, which, as we'll see, is not a great argument. We might wonder why that is. Why is Socrates giving such a bad argument when the stakes are so high? So we'll give that a little bit of thought. All right, and remember, Meletus is the accuser here. Meletus is the one that's sort of spearheading all of these charges against Socrates. And so Socrates is going to respond to Meletus in particular. And he's going to respond by saying, look, Meletus doesn't actually know what he's accusing me of. He's not serious. And if he's not serious, then that means that I'm being tried for these unofficial charges that I've already responded to. Okay. So the first charge is corrupting the youth. Okay, so when it comes to horses, many people can corrupt the behavior of such animals, whereas only a few can do good for such animals. So the idea here is that only horse breeders and maybe cowboys and veterinarians, only those folks know how to take care of animals. They know what's good for those animals, okay? Many people, like me, maybe some of you, don't know anything about horses. And so we can corrupt horses very easily because we are ignorant of horse flourishing, right? We're ignorant about what makes something a good horse. All right, so only a few people can make horses better or do good to horses, and a whole bunch of people can do horses poorly. Okay, premise 2, it stands to reason, or by analogy, that many people can corrupt the youth and few people can do them good. Well, why? Okay, well, many people can corrupt the youth because many people don't know what is good for the human heart. Many people don't know what's good for us. In contrast, very few people know what's good for young people, right? And so only a few people can do young people well. Okay, premise 3. If Meletus is serious about bringing his charges against Socrates, then he says that, then he must say that Socrates is not the only person in Athens who corrupts the youth, right? So if he's serious, he's got to say that there's other people besides Socrates that are corrupting the youth. Okay. Well, why does he have to say that? Well, because we just said that many people corrupt the youth. So we can't just say that just Socrates corrupts the youth. All right. Meletus says that Socrates is the only person in Athens that corrupts the youth. Okay. And so it follows, by modus tollens, that Meletus is not serious about bringing his charges against Socrates. He's not being genuine here, right? So we have some reasons to think that the majority of people corrupt the youth. Meletus knows that. And so if Meletus knows that, then he's got to say that people other than Socrates corrupt the youth. But he says that only Socrates is corrupting the youth. And so it follows from that he's not serious about these charges. Now, is this a good argument? I don't think so, right? For one, we might question the analogy. Okay, yeah, you're right, Socrates. The majority of people don't know things about horses. Here's one reason why. We're not horses, we're people. It doesn't necessarily follow, though, that many people don't know how to do good to another person, right? We are people, and so maybe we are human beings, so it may be that we have a better knowledge of how to do good for human beings. So if we question the analogy, then we can't get premise 3. That's the idea. So maybe it could be that just the majority of people do good to other humans, to other people. Whereas the argument needs the premise that only few people can do that. So this does seem to be a really bad argument. But we might wonder, well, why? Why is Socrates giving such a bad argument here? I mean, he knows it's a bad argument. He knows lots of things, right? He's a smart fella. Here's one tentative reason to think that Socrates intentionally gives a bad argument. It could be that he is trying to get the jury to see that Meletus can't distinguish good arguments from bad arguments, right? So, because here, Meletus is just following along, right? He's just kind of like, yeah, Socrates, yeah, that's right, Socrates, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And so in virtue of giving such a horrible argument, he's undercutting Meletus's credibility. I don't know. All right, let's look at Socrates' argument that Meletus can't be serious about the second charge. So that, remember, the second charge is that he does not believe in the gods of the city. All right, this one's a little bit longer, so we're going to take it real slow. All right. Meletus claims that Socrates is altogether an atheist. Okay. So the charge is, look, Socrates doesn't believe in the gods. Well, what does that make him? That makes him an atheist. All right. Meletus has brought Socrates up on the charge of atheism, and this is a serious charge. If Meletus is serious in bringing the charge of atheism against Socrates, then Meletus must really believe that Socrates is altogether an atheist, okay? The idea here is that, look, if I'm going to charge you with something or accuse you of something, I have to first believe genuinely that you did that thing or you believe that stuff, right? So if I accuse you of being a Republican or a Democrat, right, I first must believe that you are in fact a Republican or a Democrat, whatever. So that means that Meletus has to believe that Socrates is an atheist before Meletus brings this charge against him of atheism. Okay. 4. Spirits are commonly understood to be the children of the gods. All right. If one believes in the children of the gods, one must also believe in gods. That seems plausible enough. So if Socrates believes in spirits, then Socrates believes in the gods. 7. Meletus admits that Socrates believes in spirits. Thus, Meletus admits that Socrates believes in gods by modus ponens. So you see, if one believes in spirits, which are the children of gods, right, one has to also believe in gods. Because if one believes in spirits without believing in gods, where spirits are defined as the children of gods, well, then that doesn't make any sense, right? You wouldn't believe in spirits. You have to believe in both, or just gods, or neither, right? You can't believe in just spirits because the spirits wouldn't exist without the gods. That's the idea. Okay, so Meletus has to admit that Socrates believes in gods. Now recall that the original charge says that Socrates is accused of being an atheist, right? Not believing in the gods of the state, but in new gods or new spiritual things. If someone believes in new gods or new spiritual things, one is not altogether an atheist. Look, the original charge shows that Meletus does not really believe that Socrates is altogether an atheist. And so it follows from this, from 8 and 11, that Meletus is not really serious, not morally serious about the charge raised against Socrates, namely the charge of atheism. That's a lot to take in. Email me if you have questions, right? The idea here is that essentially, if you believe in spirits, you also believe in gods. Meletus thinks or says or agrees with Socrates when he says that he believes in spirits. That means that Socrates also believes in the gods. If Socrates believes in the gods, then he's not an atheist. And so it follows that Meletus isn't serious about his charge. That's the core of what you need to understand here. All right. All right, so for next time, reread the Apology, or if you haven't finished it, keep reading it and then reread it. Keep rereading it. This is hard. This is hard material, right? So keep yourself accountable and keep yourself busy and attempt to understand all of this to the very best that you can. Okay, we're going to talk more about the charges against Socrates. And then we're going to talk about Socrates' speech of that's in defense of his methods, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about what are the methods, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how it is that he defends those methods. Pay special attention to 30E, where he talks about being the gadfly. All right, and then we're going to close out with some of Socrates' reflections on death. We're going to look at an argument that he gives that death is really a blessing. All right. Well, this has been fun. I will see you soon.